The day that mankind picked up a rock for the purposes of doing something or someone was a major day for mankind, because on that day, mankind took control of his own destiny. On that day, the technology industry was created, and on that day, we decided that we were going to augment ourselves. Since then, we've seen rapid evolution, exponential evolution in terms of technology. The wheel, the printing press, that ill-fitting exoskeleton that many refer to as a car, the computer, the mobile phone. In fact, today is a cause for celebration, because today literally is the fastest day we have ever experienced in terms of technology growth. But by the same token, it's the slowest day we will ever experience again. So the uncertainty and volatility that we're experiencing in the marketplace today is simply a warm-up act for what is to come. My name's Ade McCormack. I'm a former technologist. Today, I help individuals and organizations thrive in the post-industrial age. I've wrote for CIO magazine for quite some time, a judge on the CIO 100, written for the FT, which is a former Pearson asset, so to speak. And so I've seen the kind of how the world of CIOs and the IT function has evolved over the years. What I believe, or my hypothesis, is that much of the change that we're experiencing today is anthropological in nature. And if we embrace this anthropological reality, we'll be in a better position to thrive ourselves and to help our organizations thrive in this post-industrial world. I'm going to talk about how the world of work, workers and leadership are changing. I'm going to talk about how culture is changing attitudes to risk. And I'm also going to look at the world of attention, which is becoming very, very important as we enter what you might call the attention economy. I'm going to make some recommendations in terms of corporate acts you can carry out in order to help your organizations thrive, and some personal disciplines to keep you, if you like, economically relevant as we leave the industrial era. Now, what I'm going to talk about goes back hundreds of thousands of years, but because I've only got a limited amount of time, I'm only going to go back about 12,000. But before I do, I'd like to ask the question, what do you understand by the term digital? Well, that ends the interactive part of this keynote. Let's have a look at it, or let's have a look at my take on it. 12,000 years ago, and for the majority of time we were on the planet, we spent most of our day chasing our lunch across the savannah. So we were highly mobile. We hunted in packs, because there's a real risk that lunch might eat us. So we were highly mobile, highly social. If we hadn't eaten for several days and lunch appeared on the horizon at 6:01, which strictly speaking is dinner, we wouldn't leave it till 9 o'clock the next day to pursue it. We'd go straight after it. So work and life were highly integrated. And pray having a degree of intelligence, it required us to make decisions in real time, to be creative. And no matter how hard we worked, if we came back to the cave with no food, it was a bad day at the office. So that's how it was for the majority of the time we were on the planet. We were mobile, social, work-life integrated, creative decision-making, and judged on our productivity, not just our activity. The same was really the case during the agricultural era. It started about 12,000 years ago. We settled by the oases, we domesticated animals, we planted seeds, and so on. We still had to be mobile, we still had to go around the fields and to market. We had to be highly social, because if I'm going to do business with you, I'm going to have to trust you. So you might say this was the start of the social economy, so to speak. Animals don't give birth on a 9-to-5 basis, so again, work and life were highly integrated. There are a lot of variables when it comes to agriculture, so we had to be creative, and we had to make decisions not just in real time, but about the future as well. And again, farmers were judged on their productivity, not their activity. But then something happened about 200 years ago. all of a sudden, mobility stopped. We had to turn up to the same factory every day and stand in the same place. We were now paid labor, so no talking on the factory line. So there went sociality. And we ran from the villages to the cities to, enjoy the economic benefits of working in a factory. But we generally didn't enjoy it. So we looked forward to the end of the day. We looked forward to the end of the week. We looked forward to the end of our lives. We created the concept of work-life balance as a way of coming to terms with the fact that we were spending most of our life doing things we didn't really enjoy. And because we were now literally cogs in the machine, we had to follow the ops manual. No creativity and no decision-making. We were literally cogs, technology placeholders. The factory owners were waiting for the technology to arrive to replace us. So no decision-making, no creativity. Now, some of the smarter workers realized that I'm getting paid a flat amount here, whether I work hard or not. So they would tend to do as little as possible. So you might say the science of laziness was developed during the industrial era. In response to that, the factory owners brought in their own equivalent of the military police, which today we refer to as management. And it's a job of managers to stop lazy workers from being lazy. And that's how it has been for the last 200 years. But towards the end of the industrial era, we saw mobility push its way into the organization, despite the IT department. We had mobile phones, we had PDAs for quite a long time, but they weren't allowed into the building. But the BlackBerry tsunami took care of that. We then saw LinkedIn and Facebook push their way in against the better wishes of the factory owners, so to speak. So we're seeing a kind of return to mobility and sociality. Young people, if you ask them, we've got a deadline tomorrow, need you to work late tonight, they'll say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I've got a concert tonight, and quite frankly, I'm looking forward to it. But I reserve the right to come back from that concert and work all night to meet the deadline. Some of us go on holiday, and we look at our mobile phones to see which restaurant we're going to eat in this evening. We won't look at our inbox because of work-life balance. That simply serves to just stress us out. So we're gravitating towards work-life integration. We're also greatly desirous of jobs that give us some autonomy, that allow us some creativity, and I would like to be judged on my productivity, not just my activity. What's starting to happen here is that the vines of nature are pushing through the concrete factory floor. And for me, this is what the digital era actually is. It's mankind's return to his true nature of being social, of being mobile, work-life integrated, creative, decision-making, and judged on productivity. That's how we're wired. That's how we've always been wired. And anthropologists, I believe, in thousands of years' time, will look back on this tiny period called the industrial era when mankind was at its most disconnected, so to speak. So digital is much more than the industrial era on tech steroids. It's much more than Industry 4.0, as the guys at Davos would have us believe. It's a fundamental shift, almost an anthropological shift, back to our true nature. So let's have a look at this from a kind of business model perspective. Many of us still work in factories, but there are no hard hats. There are no conveyor belts. There's no boiler suits. But you can tell if you work in a factory because of the inordinate focus on process to the exclusion of most other things. The other characteristic is a high degree of centrality. So all the big decisions are made by a handful of people. It's as if the majority of the people in the building do not have a brain. And the other characteristic, or the third characteristic, is the perception that what made us successful in the past will continue to make us successful in the future. These are three characteristics of industrial era organizations, regardless of whether they're a factory or a furnished office. But the reality now is disrupt or be disrupted. Process orientation is giving way to innovation orientation. And that innovation orientation is often data-driven in nature. Uber, Airbnb being two examples. Centralization is giving way to decentralized leadership, whereby people in the field can make decisions based on threats and opportunities as they occur in real time. And certainty is being replaced by chaos. And to kind of refer back to the parlance of Jeff, you can either play offensive or play defensive. And if you play offensive, you are making a big bet. You're going to take out the market, but you're going to take out your own business model as well. That's quite a brave thing to do. Most of us will play defensive. We've got an existing cash cow. It's generating money. We don't really want to tamper with it, but we don't know whether it's going to run for another 6 years, another 6 weeks, or be replaced by a 99-cent app next week. We don't know. So we better have a plan B and a plan C, D, E, F, and G. So essentially, you might say that businesses in the digital era are more like portfolios of businesses. And you might say that the majority of these plan B, C, D, etc., are kind of incubated businesses. And they're kind of on standby, so to speak, and maybe one of them's in a sort of transformation mode, because there'll become a day when the disruptor Grim Reaper turns up at reception, and you better have a plan B. So you might think of this model as a kind of portfolio of bets, or a set of insurance policies against the reality of uncertainty in the marketplace. Some people talk about bimodal IT, which is not something I particularly agree with, but I do like the idea of polymodal business. So businesses in the digital age are in the business of developing new business models. If we look at this now from a worker perspective, as I've mentioned, in the industrial era, we are cogs in the machine. We have seen the automation of blue-collar work. We're now seeing the blue-collarization of white-collar work. So none of us can be smug or confident about our long-term prospects. That's the reality of it. The banks, for example, are in a race to the bottom in terms of automate everything. And they will get to a point where they have automated everything. They'll be hyper-efficient and running at approximately 0% margin, because all the banks will be doing it. And then they'll think to themselves, how do I move back up the value stack? And how they will do this is by bringing humans back in. These humans won't be suit-wearing corporate cogs. These humans will be highly creative individuals whose innovative thoughts give rise to differentiating customer experiences that command a very high margin. Think Pablo Picasso, Lady Gaga, Andy Warhol. Geniuses, but a HR nightmare. So the only people in the organization, as we get deeper and deeper into the digital era, are people that can do things that algos, software, robots cannot do. Talent doesn't mean people. Talent doesn't mean young people. Talent means people that can do things that technology cannot do. And this is actually changing the very nature of careers. You know, a generation before me, it was one career, one employer. My generation, one career, many employers. The next generation, many careers, many employers, stroke clients. And those careers won't necessarily play out serially. Often they'll be in parallel. So in the morning, I'm an author. During the day, I'm a HR director. And at night, I'm a dubstep dinner jazz DJ. And it's not obvious which one of those is my primary career. That's how things are changing. The gig economy is not just a concept for low, blue-collar work. It's going to affect all of us. So we will be running portfolios of clients, most likely. Well, that's actually happening for many people today. Young people are looking at their parents and saying, you've worked very hard during your life, you got to the top of the pole, you've got all the toys, the cars, the holidays, the homes, but you were never really present. You were distracted. I don't want that. I've got a limited amount of time on the planet, and if I'm going to spend it at work, it's going to be doing stuff that I feel passionate about. So what I'm going to do as a young person, and even older people are doing this as well, is to reduce their economic outgoings, well, their costs, so that they can make the choice of who they work for based on what makes them feel passionate, as opposed to what they need to do in order to fund a lavish lifestyle. This is a challenge for HR functions, because what it means is that instead of just waving money at the talent problem, they have to, with your support, create great environments that attract and retain great people who will do great work with other great people. That's the challenge. And the power axis, whether we like it or not, is moving from the employer to the employee. And that changes everything. Let's have a look at this now from a leadership perspective. We know the command and control model doesn't work. It leads to very arthritic decision-making. Many leaders are taking their people on a path that increasingly deviates from reality because they insist on following the strategy, despite the real-time threats and opportunities that are popping up all around them. I'm not saying that strategy is dead, but it's deader than it's ever been. But you might say strategy velocity will change. So instead of McKinsey's going in once every 3 years or so to a company, they're going to be very likely moving towards a utilization model whereby the strategy is reviewed once a quarter, if not more frequently. So the very nature of strategy is changing. Very much like the first presentation today, it becomes more of a real-time situational awareness type activity. What good leaders know is that it's about people. It's not about the customer. There's an obsession with customers. The customer is king. But increasingly, as we move towards a service-based economy, our customers will be attracted to our best talent. Ask yourself the question, is your affinity to the hairdresser or the salon? Increasingly, we will be following the talent. So if you've got the best talent, you will get the best people. And increasingly, those best people won't come from the recruitment agencies playing buzzword bingo in terms of skills, experience, and education. The value proposition of people in the digital age will increasingly be their social connections. So what does your connectivity, your social network, bring to the brain trust of the organization that you're thinking of working for? And because we're moving away from cogs to being humans, we're now going to need humans in the workplace. So your humanity is going to be a key part of your value proposition. And we've heard about BYOD, but there's also going to be BYOS. Bring your own self to work with your frailties and the realities of being human, instead of us pretending to be these kind of perfect professional cogs, in effect. And also, part of your value proposition are going to be things that perhaps you were too embarrassed to put onto LinkedIn, or hobbies that you don't really like to talk about, because they in some way or other compromise your professional look and feel. So imagine this scenario. The recruiter approaches the CEO and says, hey, take a look at this resume. The CEO says, well, I'm not looking. Go on, take a look. The CEO takes a look and he says, well, she looks good, but she spent some time in prison. And the recruiter says, yes, but she ran a gang, and they were very successful. They controlled the narcotics trade in that wing within 3 months. Now, the CEO thinks, well, we're thinking of opening an office in the Ukraine. We need somebody who's a bit tasty. Let's take a look. Now, my point here is that this is an example of where the talent drives the strategy, not the other way around. A bit like Premier League football teams. You get the good guy, and then you build around the good guy, so to speak. So again, the talent is in the driving seat in terms of the direction that the organization travels in. And we've all heard the term the servant leader. The job of the servant leader is to get the obstacles out of the way so that great people can do great work. And great people do great work because they're passionate about what they do. They are passionate because they're dedicating their life to it. And because they're passionate about it, they are going to do a job better than any manager could demand. There are no lazy people in the digital age. There are passionate people that are world class. That's what we're driving towards. So in the digital age, you're either a leader or you're talent. Managers, there's no place for you. It's an industrial era concept. Culture. Culture was very easy to manage when you operated within a fortress or a factory. We were on the inside, they were on the outside. You could set the social behaviors and the rules quite easily. But what's happening now is our organizations are becoming more like railway stations. People are coming in, they're passing through. Some people you see every day. But if the station master stood on the concourse and said, right, everybody, today we're going to Edinburgh, people will turn around and say, I don't think so. They've got their own destinations. They are on their own paths to mastery. So earlier we saw the picture of the martial artist. Young people increasingly are looking at their careers as paths to mastery, a better version of themselves, trying to discover the extent of human performance, making a dent in the universe, whatever the motivation is. So they're only in your organization for as long as they are being propelled forward on their path to mastery. So you can no longer tell people where they're going in terms of their careers. So the very nature of culture is changing. Now I'm going to ask a personal question here, and don't feel obliged to answer it. But how many of you got 0 out of 10 at school for work done? Okay, everyone here's, it's one person who's not brilliant. Okay. History, yeah. Okay, let me ask perhaps an even more probing question. How many of you have failed in some capacity today? Okay, good. I need to tell you that you have been part of a large conspiracy. We've all been part of a large conspiracy. And our bosses have been in on it, our teachers, and worst of all, our parents. And this conspiracy is that the path to success is in the avoidance of failure. So most of us steer clear of failing in any capacity. And as a result, we never truly find out our physical and mental capabilities. And that's very, very sad. We know very well that in Silicon Valley, minimum viable products, looking at the data and so on, failure is part of the process. If we haven't failed in the course of the day, something's not going very well. The fact that we have failed in the past means that we're doing this in this room today and not in a cave. Our curiosity, coupled with risk-taking, has led to where we are today, for better or worse. Which chief executive officer or boardroom officer does this represent? Chief finance officer. And they are dressed for risk. Because they believe that risk management is risk avoidance, risk elimination, risk minimization. But in the digital age, increasingly, value comes with risk. So we need to be able to acquire value, acquire risk comfortably, and make it part of our DNA. Now, some of you will be thinking to yourself, well, no, we have regulators that stop all of that. Well, even the regulators themselves are starting to treat some of their activities as a lean startup in terms of the regulations. So I believe there's a fundamental change in terms of our attitude towards risk. It's not happening universally, but smart organizations, data-driven organizations are building risk into their model. They interact with the environment. They're either successful or they fail or they sort of fail and then they pivot and so on. Very much the lean startup model. What are these guys doing? Some sort of obstacle course, Tough Mudder challenge, and so on. Well, actually, deep down, it's something more fundamental. In their minds, they are chasing prey across the savannah. They are interacting with the environment. They're taking risks. They're living life as it used to be lived, albeit reenacted. They will come into work on Monday and they will talk of their adventures at the weekend. They will show their bruises and their sprains and so on, and we will look on and admire them, because we too deep down know that's how life is supposed to be lived. Not doing obstacle courses across rivers and so on, but engaging with the world. We are naturally curious. We are natural risk takers. And you might say another way of describing risk taker is being courageous. So I would add curiosity and courage to your personal analytics dashboard. So if you go through a day when you haven't been curious or you haven't been courageous, you're not living as you were intended. Now, I've implied that we are gravitating towards our true nature. We're returning to our true nature, so to speak. But there's a twist. As the internet becomes the Internet of Things, as portables become wearables, as wearables become embeddables, the Internet of Things becomes the Internet of Things in people. We are on a convergence course with technology. That augmentation started 200,000 years ago when we picked up that first rock. You might say we are moving from Homo sapiens to Homo extensis, or augmented man. And augmented man requires augmented services. And that has profound implications for us as service providers. So what we might be experiencing here over the last 200,000 years is literally an anthropological step change. You ask yourself the question, if you leave home in the morning and you forgot your mobile phone, how uncomfortable do you feel? That gives you a sense. Now, whether we become cyborgs or not, I don't know, but the robots are coming for sure. We saw a fantastic presentation today in respect of robotics in action. We see robots also in care homes. We see them in hotel receptions. And we see them in restaurants, though recently a number of robots got sacked for what might be described as soup delivery mismanagement. So there are issues, but the robots are coming for sure. And they're becoming increasingly emotionally intelligent. They recognize human expressions. So when they wink at you, is that because they're trying to deepen the bond with you, or they're about to take your job? Part of our skill set will be, for a certain period, to what extent we can get on with robots in the workplace. And robots, of course, come with an architecture. That architecture needs to be built into the information architecture, the business architecture, the security architecture. And the question is it a HR function matter? Is it an IT function matter? In any case, I would encourage us to embrace the robots. We've heard a lot about agility, and I'm going to get a little semantic here, so I don't want to knock agility as such. But for me, agility is when the bear is on top of you, and you have to fight the bear off. If you're agile, you'll get away. Wouldn't it be better to be anticipatory, to see the bear coming? So that when you saw the bear coming, you could do some warm-up exercises or just simply run. But whilst you wait for a bear, you get bitten by a snake. So we need to become an attentive organization, in my view. We don't know what the threats and the opportunities are, but we need to have 360, 24/7 sensory perspectives and analytics to enable us to see what's happening out there in the digital savannah. Our ability to pick up weak signals will enable us to grab markets while other organizations are still having their breakfast. As technology leaders, we need to make our boardrooms very aware when new technologies arrive on the scene. Traditionally, the boardroom would say, that's a toy, can't see how it would apply to our organization. But then one or two of the players start to use it, and that toy becomes a threat to the organization. And then eventually, the threat becomes table stakes. You can't play in that market unless you've embraced that new technology. So that's why it's so important for us to identify forthcoming technologies and start to play with them straight away. We don't quite know how they're going to help the business, but that doesn't mean they can't help the business. We've got to start playing with them. So I have a squirrel there because a squirrel is a fine example of an adaptive animal. You find them in the hottest and the coldest countries in the world. They're kind of paranoid about how they go about business. Any sign of trouble and they're out. They've adapted their back legs so they don't reverse down into the mouth of predators when they come down from trees. So, total respect for the squirrel. They're a kind of role model in terms of future business models, so to speak. Now, the last few years, I have been researching attention and cognitive capacity in respect of human performance. Because the amount of cognitive capacity we have available determines the extent to which we can be creative. And the extent to which we can be creative is the extent to which we can create differentiated customer experiences and to operate over and above what a robot can do. If we think of cognitive capacity as mental bandwidth or as a worktop, as a tabletop, if your tabletop is cluttered, you won't be able to concentrate. You may not even have space to deal with the task at hand. And even if you do have space, you're going to be distracted by everything else on the tabletop. My conceptual model of cognitive capacity has 4 elements to the worktop. There's chronic and acute disharmony, chatter, and discretionary cognitive capacity. Now, I should explain disharmony by explaining harmony. Harmony is a state of mind when you are unencumbered by any thoughts other than the task at hand. So you're totally focused on the task at hand. This can be achieved by sitting down for a night of Netflix. That's one extreme. You're just totally locked into what you're watching. The other extreme is when you are performing at the top of your skill set in highly challenging situations. That is referred to as being in a state of flow, or in the zone, so to speak. And that's where we want our people to be. That's where we want to be. That's the most fulfilling. Time just seems to kind of disappear. It's almost a Zen type experience. So chronic disharmony is the type of disharmony that's just there in the back of your mind all the time, and it's not so easy to get rid of. So, for example, unresolved relationship issues. Or perhaps an illness, a chronic illness that you have. Just every now and again, you remember that, this hurts. Or you live in a dangerous neighborhood, so you're thinking, oh God, I've got to go home now, and how's that journey going to pan out? So that's kind of chronic disharmony, not so easy to get rid of. Poverty is a good example of chronic disharmony. And if your chronic disharmony occupies the whole of your worktop, you won't have the mental capacity to find your way out of poverty. Acute disharmony is much easier to deal with. As it comes in, it might be a bleep on your phone, you respond to it, your social media. Or your boss issues an edict or a command. By dealing with it, you regain harmony, so to speak. So that's the reality of having a boss and existing in a social media world. Then there's chatter. Chatter are the random things that come into your head for no apparent reason. So what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow? Or who was the leading actress in Gone with the Wind? Or I wonder how easy it would be to learn Korean. No reason why these thoughts came into your head, but before you realize it, you've had a kind of 20-minute kind of conversation with yourself about it. Now, this could be regarded as sort of daydreaming, and it could be your subconscious telling you something that you should take heed of, but the point is it's distracting you from the task at hand. To maximize the cognitive capacity of our talent, we need to shrink these areas that reduce our ability for discretionary thinking. That's the job when it comes to talent management in the digital age. It's not just, is he or she doing a good job or not? No, bring them in for a stern conversation or perhaps put them on a training course. We've got to manage their cognitive capacity. To do that, I've developed another model identifying the main aspects of our lives. I haven't got time to go into each of them in detail, but in effect, the higher levels are heavily reliant on the lower levels. So physically, if you haven't got shelter or food, you're not going to be worrying about lifestyle issues as to whether yoga or Pilates. You know, essentially, you've got to get your physical act together, your psychological act together, and so on and so forth. Now, if we take what I've talked about throughout this presentation, sociality, mobility, and so on, these become a talent analytics dashboard, so to speak. So I might have somebody in my organization who is really productive, so they're a high performer, but I notice that they are less curious or they're less socially engaged. So with these analytics, I know that I have a talent risk in the making. Now, these may not be the ones that you choose, but I would encourage you to choose them. And you might say, well, how do I get them? Well, wearables increasingly are going to deliver on this. And you might say, oh, God, I don't want anybody knowing about how much I sleep or how much time I spend at the keyboard. But a top athlete doesn't resent their coach timing them or measuring their volume capacity. So whether we like it or not, we're moving towards becoming high-performance athletes in the workplace. And that's quite a shock, but that's the level we're going to need to operate at. And you might say this is all about paying attention. We as individuals need to pay attention to our physical well-being, psychological, emotional, and so on. If we ignore any of those lower ones, we might seem to be doing very well from a career and lifestyle perspective, but it's going to crumble at some point. So just to finish now with some recommendations. Build the workplace around our anthropological needs. Encourage mobility. That's why Google has firemen's poles and slides and chutes and so on. That's why Facebook allows its teams to have caves that they can decorate as they see fit. That's why many organizations have tropical fish tanks and plants, because deep down, synaptically, it makes us think, yeah, we're in the right place. We're on the savannah and we're hunting. So it's very sad when, through budget cutting, those things go. They have profound implications. So the reality is we never stopped being hunter-gatherers. But now, with augmentation, we're digital hunter-gatherers. Build the workplace to maximize our cognitive capacity, which is, of course, just what I was talking about. So, for example, get rid of bad leadership, redesign the office, develop systems, IT systems that are intuitive to use. Marissa Mayer of Yahoo had this smart idea of bringing everybody into work because creative people working together will be more creative. Well, I might wake up on Monday morning highly creative, but by the time I've gone through public transport and the traffic, I'm just a little less creative by the time I get to the office. And within a week or two, I arrive with zero creativity. So what she has done has she's been able to generate a massive cognitive leak by forcing people to be in the office at the same time. So we need to look around our organizations and think, where can we plug the cognitive leaks? A bit like the top athletes, when they turn up to a hotel, they have their own mattress. They go around with some tape to cover up all the LED lights on the television, for example, because they're looking to have the optimum sleep. Build the workplace to support work-life integration. We've done a great job in terms of home working, VPNs, extranets, and so on, but we haven't done very well in terms of work homing. How easily can people conduct their private life in the middle of the working day without fear of recrimination? We need to move away from activity and presenteeism to delivery and productivity. Treat your career as a lean startup. So personal recommendation. You know, when I was young, I had fantasies about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I still have. But these are, you know, fantasies, literally. We need to base our careers on the data. The ideal job, you feel passionate about it, you are competent to do it, and there's market demand. Many of us miss that market demand piece. You know, we have a half-hour conversation with a careers advisor when we're about 16 or so, and that's the end of it. We're on the conveyor belt on our career now. I believe we need to manage our careers in real time. We need to sleep with one eye open, and when we get up in the morning, ask ourselves the question, am I still economically relevant? And if I'm not, I better go and acquire what needs to be acquired to stay with the market. So we really do need to follow the market. And following the market is not something that marketeers do, it's something that we should all do if we want to stay economically in play. Lead anthropologically, and I've kind of spent quite a bit of time on that. So, you know, look at the anthropological drivers I talked about, the sociability, mobility, and so on. Flexible working is a much greater incentive than more money. Money's a short-term kind of hygiene factor, but flexibility, learning, opportunities, that's what people really value. Don't fight nature, make it your business partner. And practice deliberately. How much time do you spend each week practicing to be world class? I don't mean doing your job. I mean putting time aside to sharpen your saw, to refine your skills. Virtuoso violinists spend a lot of time just practicing the scales. Any beginner could do that. You could do it watching the television. But they do it with such intensity that it hurts. It hurts mentally. And it hurts mentally because they are literally re-engineering their brain. They are making new neuronic connections in their head. And that's what enables them to become and remain world class. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, what have we done this week where I experienced that kind of, oh God, my head hurt after that. And I don't mean smashing it with a mallet or headbutting a colleague. Literally, what are the skills you need to become or remain world class? And are you practicing them beyond a cursory, I'm kind of watching television, I'm kind of learning Spanish, I'm kind of eating my cereal? Focused, hyper-focused attention. So, to conclude, you might wonder why I have that there. Well, this is obviously a dance floor from the perspective of the DJ. And what I'm saying here is that world-class DJs and world-class digital leaders have some things in common. They both know that they need to provide an environment in which people can express themselves, express their creativity. Because when they can do that, you will get the best from them. They both know that they cannot control who comes into the building and how long they stay. At best, you can create a great brand and a great place to work and hope the word gets round. They also recognize that out of all of those thousands of people, there are one or two people that influence all the others in terms of what's socially acceptable and whether the leader is followed. In the industrial era, leadership was granted with the job title. In the digital age, leadership is granted to you by the people. So we need to embrace that reality in our leadership style. So to conclude, the world is changing. The world of work is changing. We've gone through, you might say, 4 economic eras. We're now in the digital era. So we are returning to our true nature, but there's a twist. And I think our augmentation is going to go way beyond watches and pacemakers. The 20th century was the era of IT. The 21st century is the era of biology. And the advances that we'll see in genomics, bionics, bioinformatics, and even nootropics are going to create some amazing things that we can't conceptualize in terms of human augmentation. Again, These augmented people will require augmented services, and that has profound implications for us as professional service providers. It has profound implications for us as citizens, as consumers, and in that most exacting of leadership science, parenting. So my call to arms to you is to put down your arms and make nature your business partner, because I feel in that way you'll be in a better position for yourself and to help your organization thrive in the post-industrial era. Thank you for your attention.
Well done. Thank you, Ade. Some last questions, thoughts, or anybody who has reflections? Yeah, good. Morten?
I'll just add to the leadership part is also the ability to see who fits well together to form the perfect team. That's important capability of a good leader.
Yes, and that's an interesting
beyond
one.
removing obstacles, I mean.
Yes, no, it's a very interesting one because I've described the future worker as talent, as a diva, and you know how divas are, I want rose petals in my bedroom and all that sort of thing. But if you take any chat show, primetime chat show, when the stars come onto the stage, even though they come from different walks of life, sport, Hollywood, whatever, they know that they have to play nicely. If they don't play nicely, they won't get invited back on the chat show. So yes, you do need to build a team that's cohesive in that sense, but these guys should just know that themselves. Okay.
Any other questions?
One in the corner.
Yeah, a small question about kind of the pyramid or the stack of needs. Do you see a change or a shift with the newer generations where maybe the sense of meaning gets lower instead of career and physical rewards?
Well, I think many of us turned up to work because of the economic benefits of it. Now, increasingly, young people, and I don't want to overly generalize, but they're looking for a greater sense of purpose, if you like. So the organization itself needs to have a great sense of purpose. So if I'm Mars Confectionery, for example, saying, guys, let's get revved up to give the next generation type 2 diabetes, it's not a great pitch. So organizations have got to try and work out, well, what is their grander purpose? And they will more easily draw people towards them, so to speak. But I'm not sure that was what you were.
Yeah, it means that the sense of purpose gets more important than career or financial benefits. So it would.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well, there's a whole, the whole industrial era is based on conspicuous consumption and affluenza. So I might, let's imagine I have a Maserati car. I could turn up to an event that's for millennials. And instead of them looking at me as, wow, he's arrived, in life, they look at me as a sad case that needs to show off, and I'm just burning the atmosphere just for my own personal brand, which makes it a big challenge for the top level brands where they're all about being unaffordable. That's the whole point of them. And this may be a post-Lehman's thing, buying things that are unaffordable is just simply stupid in the eyes of many young people.
Very good. Thank you, Ade. Appreciate it. One more question? Yeah. Oh. The lawyer himself.
I won't ask a question about lawyers. Hi. As the nature of work transitions and people's roles get replaced by the whole rafts of automation and things we've heard about today, how do you see that transition working? Because I don't believe there are enough roles out there that are suited for passionate, creative, authentic, self-actualizing people. And whilst this transition, and I'm not sure there ever will be, so how do you see that panning out over the next few decades?
Well, it's a good question. One extreme is that we get into a post-work world where literally the robots are doing it all and we get some sort of universal wage. And if you've seen the film WALL-E, that's one of the scenarios that could play out. The other is that as parents, we're advising our children to be lawyers, to be heart surgeons, and so on. Being a heart surgeon in 10 years' time will be like a quick-fit tire fitter in terms of the skill required because of robotics and all sorts of 3D printing and so on. So a lot of, again, this is the blue collarization of white-collar work. New jobs will be created, and these jobs don't exist yet. And I realized this with my own son, who's 17 now. So in fact, I wrote a book called Beyond 9 to 5, Your Career Guide to the Digital Age, because I anticipate that despite his good education, it is not equipping him for the wider world. The way I look at it is, I've got a Shetland sheepdog. And when we walk through the field and we come to some sheep, he looks at me and looks at the sheep and is a bit bewildered. He doesn't quite know what to do. He's so domesticated that he's forgotten what his primary function is. Most of us are in that state. How long would we last in the savannah is the reality. And we are entering the savannah economically. There's no, government social contracts are being torn up right, left, and center. They can't sustain it. So it's kind of sort of every man for himself, so to speak. So we need to acquire, you might say, the street smart skills of surviving economically in this digital age. So I'm hoping that governments will wake up everybody to this reality. But basically, the party's largely over, as I can see. But there's great opportunity if we find that thing that we're passionate about and there's a market demand for it. But instead of finding something at the age of 20 and think, right, that'll do me for the rest of my life, you review that on a monthly basis. So at best, you have got a transient monopoly in what you do individually, and your organization similarly, at best, has a transient monopoly.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you, Ade.
Okay.
Great thoughts, great thoughts. Yeah, you're good.